Last night's episode of Jimmy Kimmel Live didn't just draw attention. It set off a storm, breaking expectations and turning a simple interview into a clash of ideas. What began as a standard political conversation quickly became one of the most talked about moments in late-night television, leaving a lasting impression. Before we dive into the full story, let us know in the comments where you're watching from, and make sure to subscribe so you stay updated with the latest news. Under the intense stage lights, the crowd responded with loud cheers, creating a mix of applause and scattered boos that filled the room with tension. Karoline Leavitt, the youngest White House press secretary in U.S. history, walked onto the stage with a sharp, composed energy. Her blonde hair and piercing gaze immediately captured attention. Dressed in a striking red suit, she made it clear she was here to make a statement. Facing her was Jimmy Kimmel, the late-night host known for his wit and timing. He smiled as always, but behind that expression was a plan to turn the conversation into a moment of memorable satire. The studio audience was clearly split, one side chanting in support of the president, the other laughing along with Kimmel's remarks. As the camera zoomed in, Leavitt's expression remained calm and focused. Her posture steady, she radiated cool determination. Kimmel, standing confidently in a sleek black suit, looked ready to lead the discussion like a seasoned performer prepared to test every answer. With the opening music fading, the spotlight settled on Kimmel behind his desk. His grin was warm, but his words hinted at what was to come. "Welcome to an evening full of surprises," he opened, his tone smooth but lined with sarcasm. The audience laughed loudly, some even whistling as he fired his first comment. "Tonight, we're joined by someone from the White House. Hopefully she brought a map. It's easy to get lost in my questions." Laughter filled the room, but on the edge of the stage, Karoline Leavitt didn't react. Instead, she offered a calm smile, as if she'd anticipated every word. With confidence, she approached the guest seat, her red outfit glowing under the eye, lights like a sign of readiness. She shook Kimmel's hand, briefly but firmly, before taking her seat, legs crossed, eyes locked on him. The crowd fell silent, sensing the quiet intensity between the two. Kimmel leaned forward slightly, resting his hands on the desk. His tone stayed light, but there was a clear purpose behind his words. "Karoline, welcome. What's it like being the public face of the White House? Or should I say, the person responsible for cleaning up the president's tweets?" The audience burst into laughter once more, but Leavitt didn't react with surprise. She smiled, responding with a voice as clear and controlled as ever. "What's it like?" Kimmel asked. "I'm proud, Jimmy," Leavitt replied calmly. "Proud to represent millions of Americans, not those sitting here twisting facts just to get a laugh." The studio fell into silence with only light applause from a few of her supporters. Kimmel raised an eyebrow, his smile briefly fading before he regained control of the moment. "Oh, coming in strong. I respect that," he said with a half smile. "But seriously, doesn't your job ever feel a little like stand-up comedy?" Leavitt tilted her head slightly, her eyes catching the light. "Comedy? No, Jimmy, that's your area. I'm here to say what matters, not to put on a show for the cameras." The audience responded again, this time louder and more unified in support. Kimmel raised a hand, signaling them to quiet down. The camera zoomed in. His smile remained, but a subtle tension flickered in his expression. Leavitt sat upright, her posture steady, eyes locked on Kimmel like a challenger unwilling to back down. The lights above intensified, casting sharper shadows as Kimmel leaned forward, still smiling but with a more focused gaze. "Karoline," he began, "you say you represent Americans, but when the president's policies push prices higher, how do you explain that to families struggling to make ends meet?" The crowd fell quiet again, whispers passing among some viewers, sensing the mood shifting from playful to serious. Leavitt remained composed, hands calmly resting in her lap, her gaze unwavering. "Jimmy, rising costs are a global problem, not just limited to the U.S., she said, her voice steady and cutting. "We're preserving jobs and protecting our economy from foreign reliance. Do you ever mention the millions who held on to their jobs because of our decisions? Or do you only quote numbers that get a laugh? Another burst of applause followed, this time more forceful. Her supporters' cheers echoed through the room. Kimmel adjusted in his seat, trying to slip in a witty line. "Oh, I love numbers, especially when they crash like the stock market," he joked. There was laughter, but it didn't carry the same energy as before. Leavitt pushed on without missing a beat. "Market ups and downs are normal, Jimmy," she said, her voice now overpowering the fading laughter. "What's not normal is someone like you spending entire segments distorting facts instead of asking real questions." The audience split again. Some stood and clapped while others booed, creating a wave of noise that filled the space. Kimmel lifted his hand, trying to settle the crowd, but the strain showed in his eyes. "Real questions, huh?" he replied, his voice now sharper. "All right then. How do you justify the president repeatedly making claims that are, let's say, difficult to fact-check?" Leavitt gave a faint, confident smile. "Polite. That's a new tone for you, isn't it?" she said, drawing a few laughs from scattered corners of the audience. This time, with full resolve, Leavitt replied firmly, "I'm not here to play with words, Jimmy. The president speaks his mind, and I provide the necessary clarity. But if we're talking about things that are hard to verify, maybe we should start with how your show edits clips just to get a laugh." The stage echoed with applause, louder than ever, forcing Kimmel to pause and gather himself. The camera caught his face still smiling, though the tension shone in the corners of his lips. Before he could reply, Leavitt turned toward the audience, her voice cutting through the air. "Folks, I know you came here to be entertained, but you deserve more than just jokes. You deserve honesty. You deserve to know what's really going on in this country and what we're trying to do." The crowd roared. Many stood, chanting her name. "Karoline! Karoline!" Kimmel tried to regain control. "Hey, this is a comedy show, not a political stage," he said. But his words were drowned out by the overwhelming reaction. Leavitt stared directly at him, unshaken. "If it's just comedy, then why do you look so uncomfortable when I speak the truth?" Kimmel leaned in closer, his voice now edged with irritation. "Truth? You talk about truth while standing behind someone who's made a mess of things. Don't you ever get tired of defending him?" The question hit hard. The audience waited in silence. Leavitt didn't blink. A faint smile played on her lips as she answered, "I'm not covering for anyone, Jimmy. I'm speaking up for the Americans you overlook, the workers, the families, the ones who still believe in this country. What about you? What do you stand for besides laughs and ratings?" The audience burst into applause again, louder than before, with some shouting in agreement. The atmosphere was electric. Kimmel struggled to maintain his cheerful tone, but the unease in his eyes was now visible. "You're good, Karoline," he said, his voice tight. "But if you're so sure of yourself, answer plainly. Do you really think the president's doing a good job, or is that just your job talking?" Leavitt tilted her head slightly, eyes locked on Kimmel, and replied without hesitation, "I believe in what we're doing, working to build a stronger America. What about you, Jimmy? Do you believe in what you say every night? Or is it just a script you read for a paycheck?" Another wave of applause roared across the room, drowning out Kimmel's attempt to speak. The camera zoomed in on Leavitt's face, steady, confident, fearless. Kimmel's voice cracked slightly as he tried to recover. All right," he said, struggling to sound upbeat. "You want to play tough? Let's see how you handle this." He gestured to his team, and a large screen behind him lit up. The screen played a clip from one of Leavitt's White House briefings. In the footage, she stood at the podium, appearing slightly unsure while addressing the impact of tariffs. The clip had been edited to highlight her momentary hesitation. A reporter in the video smirked just as the footage paused, freezing on a frame where she looked at a loss for words. The audience erupted in laughter, encouraged by Kimmel, who raised his hand dramatically like a performer landing a punchline. "Karoline, is this the truth you're talking about?" Kimmel asked, his tone triumphant. "You looked like you were scrambling when that reporter asked about prices spiking 15% because of the president's tariffs." Karoline Leavitt sat tall, her eyes sharp and unflinching, locking onto Kimmel like he'd just walked into a carefully laid trap. "That's disappointing, Jimmy," she said, her voice steady and cutting, echoing through the studio. "You had to dig through hours of footage just to find 5 seconds of hesitation, but you didn't show the 10 minutes that followed, where I laid out the facts." She leaned in slightly, her voice rising with purpose. "Tariffs helped create 2.3 million manufacturing jobs last year, per the Department of Labor's own report. Want me to repeat that?" A section of the crowd erupted in applause, cheers overpowering the laughter. Kimmel's smile wavered, but he pressed on. "Jobs?" he said, eyebrows raised. "Americans are paying 20% more for imported goods because of that policy. Is that your version of the truth too?" Leavitt offered a cold, confident grin. "You love numbers, don't you?" she replied, her tone razor-sharp. "Let's look at one more. Before tariffs, we imported 60% of our steel from China. That cost us 500,000 American steel jobs between 2000 and 2015, per the International Economic Institute." She leaned in. "Now, because of our policies, domestic steel production is up 25%. That's why I'm here, Jimmy. To defend the workers your jokes never mention." The audience roared again, clapping so loudly that Kimmel had to raise his hand to calm them. The camera cut to his face, still smiling, but his grip on the pen in his hand had tightened. A flicker of panic crept into his eyes. Trying to regain control, Kimmel leaned forward, his voice edged with bitterness. "You're good with numbers, Karoline, but you can't deny your administration is creating chaos. Don't you ever stop and wonder, when the whole world laughs at what the president says, whose side you're really on?" The question hit hard. The room fell silent. Leavitt didn't flinch. Her voice was calm, but it cut like a blade. "The world laughed when we lost millions of jobs to bad trade deals. I stand with the Americans who were left behind, the workers in Ohio, Michigan, Pennsylvania." She locked eyes with him. "Who do you stand with, Jimmy, besides the audience laughing at your script?" The crowd erupted again, cheers shaking. The studio, chants of "Karoline, Karoline" echoed through the space. Kimmel tried to interject. "This is a show, not a campaign rally," he said, but his voice was drowned out by the crowd. Leavitt turned to the audience, her voice now rising with power. "Folks, I know you came here for entertainment, but you deserve more than cheap laughs. You deserve to know about the people fighting to bring back jobs, secure our borders, and build a stronger America. That's the truth I bring, no matter how hard he tries to spin it." Applause thundered across the studio, overwhelming Kimmel's attempts to steer the show back on track. He leaned in again, his voice tinged with desperation. "Truth? You call standing behind someone who constantly spreads falsehoods the truth? Don't you get tired of performing every day?" Leavitt tilted her head, a defiant smile on her lips. "Performing? I stand in front of dozens of reporters every day, answering the hardest questions. No script, no laugh track, no editing team. To save me like you. What about you, Jimmy?" she asked, her voice cool and cutting. "Are you tired of playing the smart guy every night, or is that just your act?" The audience erupted again, laughter now aimed squarely at Kimmel. He paused, caught off guard, trying to collect himself, but Leavitt didn't give him the chance. She pressed on, her voice like a blade delivering the final strike. "You want to talk about falsehoods? Let's talk about how you edit words. Twist facts and turn everything into a joke. You don't care about Americans, you care about ratings." She leaned in, her tone turning sharper. "I'm here to defend the people you ignore, and I won't let you reduce that to a punchline." Kimmel tried to cut in. "You're turning my show into a political forum, Karoline." But she didn't let him finish. "No, Jimmy," she snapped, eyes blazing. "I'm turning it into a place where truth is spoken. And if that scares you, maybe it's time you considered a different career." The stage felt ablaze. The audience rose to their feet, cheers crashing like a tidal wave, sweeping away Kimmel's every attempt to regain control. Leavitt turned to face them again, her voice booming. "Don't let people like him decide what you believe. You're smarter than that. You're stronger than that. And we, those fighting for you, Won't stop no matter how many jokes come our way. The crowd erupted once more, louder than ever, chanting her name, standing, applauding. Kimmel sat in silence, his smile now barely holding, an echo of its former self. Trying to salvage the moment, Kimmel forced a grin. Wow, Karoline, you really know how to heat up a stage. But his voice was swallowed by the noise. Leavitt turned to him, her expression calm, but victorious. I'm not done yet, Jimmy, she said softly, the words slicing like a whispering knife. But I'll give you a moment to think before we continue. The camera zoomed in on her face. Unshaken, radiant with unshakable confidence, Kimmel raised his hand, trying to quiet the studio. We'll be back after the break, he said, voice strained as he tried to sound upbeat. But the cheers didn't stop. The applause thundered on. Karoline Leavitt had turned the interview into a battlefield, and she was winning. When the show returned, the atmosphere hadn't cooled. The audience was still standing, still chanting her name. The spotlight glared down on her, illuminating her red suit like a flame that refused to dim. She sat still, unyielding, like a warrior who'd seized the high ground and wasn't done fighting. Kimmel leaned forward, his voice now tinged with desperation and bitter frustration. Karoline, you talk about the truth, but the entire country sees you backing someone who's wrecked the economy. Gas prices are up 30%. Inflation hit 8% last year, per the Bureau of Labor Statistics. He narrowed his eyes, hoping this would break her composure. You call that building? The question flew like a final arrow, direct, pointed, meant to pierce her armor. The audience held its breath, some boos, some cheers. Tension simmering in the air as all eyes turned to Karoline Leavitt. She didn't flinch. Instead, she smiled, a confident, razor-sharp grin, and fired back without hesitation. Jimmy, you love statistics when they work for you, don't you? Gas prices? That's a global issue. Crude oil spiked 40% because of Middle East conflicts. That's the context you never mention. She leaned forward, her voice rising. But here's what you won't say. We've increased domestic oil production by 15% and created 300,000 new jobs, per the Department of Energy. I call that building. What do you call it? Sitting here and whining? The stage exploded again, applause roaring like a tsunami. Audience members rose to their feet, shouting in support. Kimmel tried to cut in. Building? You're defending someone who's made us a laughingstock globally. But Leavitt's voice rang louder, drowning him out. Laughingstock. The world laughed when we lost millions of jobs under failed policies. I'm here to speak for the Americans you never mention. The miners in West Virginia, the factory workers in Indiana. Do they ever make it into your jokes? Or do you just laugh at what you don't understand? The audience lost it, cheers erupting, shaking the studio. Kimmel, now visibly cornered, reached for a final blow. Karoline, say what you want, but the country sees you backing someone who can't keep promises. Don't you ever get tired of playing spokesperson for a failure? Silence. For a beat, the studio went still, every eye on her. Leavitt stood slowly, composed, yet radiating authority. Her eyes locked onto Kimmel like a final blow was coming. Failure? Her voice cracked like thunder. We've brought millions of jobs back. Unemployment down to 3.5%, the lowest in 50 years, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. She stepped closer. Failure is you, sitting here, lobbing stones at people fighting for this country, just to squeeze out a few cheap laughs. The audience erupted. Applause surged like a tidal wave. Many stood, chanting her name. Leavitt turned to them, her eyes blazing. You deserve to hear about the people building this nation, not lies wrapped in late-night laughter. I'm here for you, and I won't let anyone, not even Jimmy Kimmel, stand in the way of that. The cheers turned to a storm. Every word drowned in roaring support, but Leavitt didn't linger. Calmly, without anger, she removed her mic. Deliberate act of power. I don't need your stage to speak the truth, she said, locking eyes with Kimmel. Her voice was steel. I came here to represent Americans. You just wanted a circus. Thanks, Jimmy, but I'm done. She turned to the audience, raising one hand like a queen before her people. Don't let voices like his decide what you believe. Believe in the truth. The studio burst into wild applause and chants. Karoline, echoing like a victory cry. Kimmel, tried a weak jab. Wow, looks like she didn't like my stage lights. But the scattered laughter only highlighted his loss. Leavitt walked off the stage, calm, powerful, head high, her red suit glowing beneath the lights like living fire. The cameras followed. Her exit, capturing a moment that felt historic. The studio was chaotic, cheers, debates, phones raised to record what had just happened. Behind his desk, Kimmel forced a smile, but his eyes showed what his words couldn't hide. Well, that was an interesting night, he tried, voice cracking with forced humor. But the light laughter that followed couldn't erase the aftermath. The camera panned across the crowd, stunned faces, phones still raised, Kimmel gripping the desk, like a man trying to hold on to control that had already slipped through his fingers. We'll be back after the break, he said, but the studio remained electric, no one paying attention to his closing words. Within minutes of Leavitt's exit, social media exploded like a tidal wave. Twitter was flooded with hashtags like Leavitt rules and Kimmel schooled, with thousands of posts pouring in every second. One user wrote, Karoline Leavitt just turned Jimmy Kimmel into a spectator on his own show. Queen, alongside a clip of her removing her mic that racked up over 2 million views in just 10 minutes on TikTok. Slow-motion videos of her walking, off with that icy gaze spread like wildfire, many set to triumphant music like scenes from a Hollywood movie. A Gen Z user posted, she didn't just win, she dominated, adding a fire emoji that pulled in tens of thousands of likes. Even Instagram, usually flooded with fashion posts, was overtaken by tributes to Leavitt. Captions read, "This is how you stand up to biased media," under photos and reels of the viral moment. Kimmel's supporters tried to push back, but their voices were buried. One account wrote, Leavitt just talked without answering anything, but replies flooded, saying she answered with truth while Kimmel only had jokes. Reddit buzzed with debate, as a thread on Our Politics drew over 10,000 comments calling the Showdown the TV battle of the decade. A top comment read, Leavitt didn't just beat Kimmel. She exposed how entertainment media twists truth. For profit, conservatives across platforms hailed her as a beacon of honesty, while many neutral viewers admitted, I don't support Trump, but Leavitt gave Kimmel a lesson. Mainstream media jumped in quickly. Fox News posted that night, Karoline Leavitt annihilates Jimmy Kimmel on his own turf, quoting her line about forgotten Americans as a victory slogan. Newsmax ran the headline, Press Secretary crushes, comedian, truth triumphs, highlighting Leavitt's 3.5% unemployment stat as a generational win. Meanwhile, left-leaning outlets like CNN grudgingly acknowledged her strength, though downplaying it with lines like, Leavitt may have scored points, but she dodged questions about Trump's failures, while still admitting she turned Kimmel's stage into her own press podium. YouTube exploded with reaction videos. A conservative content creator with over 1 million subscribers posted an analysis titled, Leavitt didn't just win, she changed late-night TV. The video hit 500,000 views in just hours. Even typically apolitical influencers chimed, I didn't know who she was before, but now I want to learn more about White House policy. Gen Z, often seen as politically indifferent, flooded to follow her across platforms, boosting her social media presence by over 200,000 followers overnight. Inside the studio, arguments erupted even as the show cut to commercials. Audience members held up their phones, recording live clips for Instagram stories with captions like, I just witnessed history. Others, even those unsure about Leavitt's politics, whispered to friends, she's tough, and Kimmel didn't stand a chance. An older audience member leaned in and said, it's been a long time since someone spoke this boldly on television. The chaos became so intense that studio staff had to intervene, urging people to take their seats, but the cheers reignited every time her name was mentioned. Backstage, Kimmel's team was in panic mode. One producer shouted into a headset, "We just let her steal the show," while another whispered, "Ratings will spike," but the cost was brutal. Kimmel, still in his host chair, stared blankly at the monitor, the smile gone from his face. He knew he'd been defeated, not by a veteran politician, but by a young woman armed with truth and conviction. Meanwhile, Leavitt, having exited the studio, stepped into the night like a victor. She didn't look back, but her eyes said it all. She had turned a stage built for entertainment into a battlefield for truth, and walked away wearing an invisible crown. Within hours, Karoline Leavitt had become a national phenomenon, not just for confronting Kimmel, but for turning a TV moment into a rallying cry. She hadn't just silenced the host. She made the entire country stop and listen, and that, more than anything, was the real victory. It felt as if he were entering a battle he'd already lost. The audience clapped, but the cheers lacked fervor. A scattered echo of support laced with murmurs of Karoline Leavitt and last night's storm. Kimmel sat down, eyes locked on the camera, trying to steady himself with a weak smile and a line. "Hey everyone, tonight we'll keep it lighter because I'm not sure I can handle another fight." The studio laughed, but it was hollow, unable to push back the shadow that Leavitt had cast just 24 hours ago. He couldn't pretend it didn't happen. The internet was still on fire. The clip of her calmly removing her mic had passed 10 million views on YouTube. Analysts called it a knockout, a historic moment where a young press secretary dismantled a seasoned TV veteran. Kimmel took a breath, his voice lower than usual, edged with rare sincerity. "Last night I had let's call it, a lively conversation with Karoline Leavitt. I went too far. And I want to say, I respect her strength. She's a formidable opponent." Sparse applause followed, polite at best, but the air was heavy with disbelief. To many, his apology felt scripted. Too little, too late. Twitter was merciless. One post read, "Kimmel apologizing too late. Leavitt won by knockout." It racked up over 50,000 likes in an hour. Meanwhile, inside the White House briefing room, Karoline Leavitt stepped up to the podium like a general returning from war. Her navy suit was sharp, composed, but her eyes still burned with the same fire that shook late-night television. Reporters, usually relentless, looked hesitant, as if unsure how to face the woman who had turned entertainment media on its head. One tried to break the tension. "Miss Leavitt, about your showdown with Jimmy Kimmel. Do you regret walking off the stage?" She didn't flinch. Her gaze cut through the silence. "Regret? I went there to speak the truth, and I did. I walked off because I don't need stage lights to prove it." The room, typically devoid of emotion, broke into scattered applause, something almost unheard of in that sterile space. Her words made headlines instantly. Fox News led with, "Leavitt fires back at Kimmel from the White House. Truth doesn't need a stage." Newsmax called it a seismic moment. In 24 hours, Leavitt turned a comedian into a cautionary tale. Even neutral outlets like USA Today had no choice but to admit, Leavitt redefined the line between politics and performance. On social media, her following exploded. Over 300,000 new followers in a single day. Young Americans, often politically apathetic, posted comments like, "You're the role model I've been waiting for," and "Thank you for speaking up when no one else does." Leavitt, usually quiet online, broke her silence with just one tweet. "Thank you for listening to the truth." It was simple, powerful, and within hours it passed 1 million engagements. She didn't need to say more. The truth had already done the talking. Kimmel, on the other hand, felt the backlash. Nielsen data showed a 10% drop in viewership the very next night. Advertisers whispered about reconsidering sponsorships. Inside his team, an emergency meeting was called. "No more politicians," one producer warned. "It's too risky now." Kimmel tried to stay composed, but insiders revealed he privately confided, "I didn't expect her to be that tough." His carefully crafted apology wasn't enough. Variety wrote, "Kimmel hoped for a viral moment. Leavitt gave him one, but not the kind he wanted." That same night, Leavitt appeared on Fox News, reinforcing her message. "We're working for Americans, the workers, the families, the people ignored by entertainment media." That single quote was replayed across articles, TikToks, and YouTube shorts. One college student uploaded a passionate analysis titled, "Leavitt doesn't just speak, she acts." The video hit 200,000 views in a day. In the halls of the White House, aides and advisors whispered her name with reverence. A senior official was quoted anonymously saying, "She didn't just handle Kimmel, she taught the media a lesson." And when asked about Kimmel's apology during a later press gaggle, Leavitt's answer was crisp. "I don't need an apology. The truth spoke for me." That line took on a life of its own, printed on t-shirts, turned into Instagram captions, and plastered across memes. She had become more than a press secretary. She was now a cultural force. While Kimmel struggled to recover, Karoline Leavitt rose like a phoenix, not just remembered as the woman who walked off a stage, but as the one who turned it into her launchpad. She proved that in a world saturated with sarcasm and spectacle, truth could still cut through. And in doing so, she didn't just win a debate, she started a movement. Karoline Leavitt broke the mold, showing that a young woman with unwavering conviction could force the media industry to reevaluate itself. Her influence captivated the media, with Fox News describing her as a relentless force, quoting her comments about forgotten Americans as a rallying cry for a new generation. A Wall Street Journal article noted, "Karoline Leavitt didn't just outshine Kimmel. She exposed the divide between entertainment media and reality, forcing us to question what we're really laughing at." Even left-leaning outlets such as MSNBC hesitantly acknowledged that Leavitt turned a comedy show into a platform for serious issues, a rare achievement few could manage. Leavitt became a topic of discussion in college courses, where students examined how she skillfully used language and confidence to shape public perception. Social media buzzed continuously about her, with the Tyler's Leavitt Rules hashtag trending for an entire week, amassing over 5 million posts. A TikTok video of a young woman mimicking Leavitt walk and mannerisms as she removed her mic garnered 3 million views, captioned, "Learn to stand up like Karoline." Memes flooded Instagram, featuring images of her confronting Kimmel with an unwavering stare, and her quote, "Truth doesn't need a stage," now printed on mugs and t-shirts. One user wrote, "Leavitt proves you don't need to shout to be heard, just speak the truth, right?" The post received 100,000 likes, highlighting her broad influence across all generations. In a Newsmax interview, Leavitt emphasized, "I didn't go after Kimmel for personal reasons, but for the millions of Americans who have no voice on late-night TV." This line spread quickly, becoming a symbol for those who felt ignored by the media. She made appearances on conservative podcasts, where she was hailed as the Queen of Truth, and was even invited on neutral shows to discuss the role of the media. After hearing her, a college student tweeted, "I used to think politics was dirty, but she makes me want to get involved." The tweet received 50,000 likes, showing how she inspired the next generation. Leavitt's impact wasn't just about defeating Kimmel, it was about shifting the national conversation. Late-night shows like those of Stephen Colbert and Jimmy Fallon became more cautious about inviting political guests, fearing a repeat of the Kimmel debacle. An Atlantic article stated, "Leavitt demonstrated that entertainment media isn't invincible. One person, armed with truth, can bring down an empire." Leavitt became an inspiration for young women, with hundreds of Instagram posts reading, "Karoline made me believe I can stand up too." More than just a press secretary, Leavitt became a symbol of truth, turning a televised moment into a movement for courage and integrity in a noisy world. The showdown between Karoline Leavitt and Jimmy Kimmel highlighted the polarization and role of media in today's society, where truth is often overshadowed by humor or drama. Leavitt's actions, standing firm with confidence, using hard data such as 2.3 million manufacturing jobs and a 3.5% unemployment rate to counter Kimmel, showed the power of preparation and belief in one's values. She didn't just take on a famous comedian. She exposed how entertainment media can twist the truth, like when Kimmel edited her press briefing clip to make her appear flustered. Leavitt's bravery in removing her mic and saying, "I don't need this stage to speak the truth," reflected the spirit of standing up for one's beliefs, even in the face of hostility. Her story offers a real-life lesson in today's world of heated debates on social media and TV, where emotions often take over. We can learn from Leavitt how to stand firm with truth and dignity, prepare thoroughly like she did with data, and respond with calm logic rather than engaging in emotional outbursts. Most importantly, we can learn when to walk away from pointless arguments, protecting our values as she did. This powerful lesson reminds us that in a world filled with noise, truth and dignity are the most powerful tools for creating change. Subscribe to join us as we explore moments where truth triumphs, like Karoline Leavitt. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.